AI music generator used as a learning tool. Get ready and some coffee because the rockin' ain't stopping now that we learned how to build beats with our online AI app. First off, what is an AI music generator? How does it work? Once we understand that, we can think about how to utilize the AI music generator to help us and others learn things, possibly using it as a self-help tool to help us learn things, or as a teaching tool in the hands of a teacher or possibly a parent to help others learn stuff. The AI music generator obviously is going to be generating AI type of music, and therefore it could be particularly useful for those types of learners who are audio type learners, noting many people have a different preferred format of learning. Possibly the most popular is a visual type of format of learning. Then you've got the audio type of format of learning that people like to take things in through sound, and the tactile type of learning, we're actually toying with things using our hands oftentimes. Now, obviously, all of us use all of those formats of learning, so a tool like this will be useful to anybody, but in particular, people that really enjoy kind of taking things in through their ears. And possibly you can tell that by people that really like audiobooks, then this could be a useful tool, not only utilizing the ears, but also putting in rhythm and whatnot, which could be a great way to kind of learn things and take things in and make them a little bit more interesting as we do so. Now, obviously, the AI music generator is a form of artificial intelligence. Therefore, we can compare it to doing something similar to what many of us are kind of used to now, at least to some degree, even though it came out quite recently, the text generators like a ChatGPT, which is kind of like a Google search, but rather than having a Google search that's going to give you results to other areas and compile those results based on the Google search, it actually has all the information in its AI brain somehow. I'm not going to get into the detail of that, but we can visualize it as an artificial intelligence, a type of brain that's been fed all of this kind of textual type of stuff, which you would think would include all the free stuff, all the stuff on the internet, all the works of literature that are free. You would think those would be the types of things that they would totally include in like the artificial AI brain of a text generator, which helps to give you the answers or whatever you're asking the text generator to generate for you. Obviously, those things are becoming amazingly crazy, almost scarily good at things. The music generator you would expect to be similar in nature, right? So I'm not sure exactly how they are going to feed it musical rules and whatnot, but obviously they're going to be picking up any kind of music format that they can and basically feed that into the AI. And you would also think that it is still a form of text. So that means that you're still going to give it a lot of the text stuff you would think to train it with its AI mind. So that's going to include all the stuff on the internet you would think, all the free books and whatnot, because the AI music generator not only has to come up with a melody, it has to come up with text. So it still, you can think of it, I'm thinking of it at least still as kind of like a text-based thing to a large degree, which is a little bit different than the AI art generation, because it is not really text-based. And therefore, when you put in a prompt about, give me an image about a book, like the Iliad will be our project, it might not recognize that because it's been trained on just images. Whereas you would think, again, the lyrics are textual, therefore you would think it would still be trained on text, and obviously the text generators are textual. Okay, given that, how can we kind of use this AI music generator? So what I've been working on is something that has a storyline, a history story or a story narrative is one thing that we can put in place. So if you're trying to learn something that happens in some kind of list or some kind of story, like the history events and then the narrative about what's happening in the history, or a novel of some kind that's going to have some particular order, typically there's going to be a timeline, then that is one thing we can make a playlist, which we'll talk about, and that can help us to learn anything that has a list. Now, even like when I think about like a history event or even a narrative, oftentimes there's going to be a timeline, which that part you can still think of as a list. So what kind of lists do we have? Learning a new language, you could have lists of words. So the list of words, instead of just having flashcards, we might be able to put some rhythm in it, or in addition to the flashcards. Any kind of flashcard thing, which we would normally put like vocabulary words or any kind of short answer things we're trying to memorize, is something that we might be able to do a similar thing with a musical kind of format as well. We'll talk about that more. Any kind of fill in the blank type of question, anything that has a timeline, like a history event or some kind of novel narrative. So we'll talk about these more in a bit. We can listen to a book in music form. Now, I've noticed that you can actually make a song out of the actual text of the book. So we're going to be looking at like the Iliad for our example. You can actually, because it's in the public domain, copy every from 2-minute chunks or 4-minute chunks of the text and put it into a musical form, which is kind of interesting, particularly with something like the Iliad or something like Dante's Inferno, because those had some kind of rhythm to it. They were kind of like poetry, like you would think like Shakespeare possibly, or what was the other one that has a rhythm? Because you would think if you put it to music and it has a rhythm to it, that might be kind of interesting. I don't know. We'll see. But create music to play along with. So obviously any of these things that we then create, we can then actually play along with that music, and we can use tools to see what kind of key they built the song in, and then play along with it as well if you have an instrument and you're into that, like a guitar. So I have a guitar, so I can try to play with that. So let's look at these in a little bit more detail, and then we'll have the course will kind of go into more techniques on how we can get into each of these. So learning history or a novel. So I think the music is a great tool for learning the history or a novel. So for example, if you're trying to learn, the events, of the 1900s or whatever in Europe or something, then of course there's going to be some chronological list of things that you're going to have to learn. So you could just create a list, and that'll give you a musical kind of format of the list, possibly giving you a beat so that we can try to understand the context. As I've been working, and a novel is similar, so we're going to be using the Iliad as an example because it's an open source text, meaning it's free to use, and we'll talk more about why that might be a little bit easier than some that aren't. Like if you used a novel that's not currently free, like a Brandon Sanderson novel, then you might be able to use the same tools, but because the text isn't open source, the AI might not have the entire novel in its AI mind the way that you would think it does with like an open source type of novel. Now, I've been thinking about how to learn like something like the Iliad, right? The Iliad's a little bit difficult for some people to learn. A lot of the ancient, or the older texts are. Even Shakespeare's difficult because the language is a little bit different. Although, of course, with Shakespeare, you kind of want to focus on the language because he uses a lot of good tricks that you want to kind of pick up, even if the whole rhythm isn't your thing or whatever. But it could be a little difficult, like the Iliad's in ancient Greek, and then it gets translated, and then we don't know like the context, where obviously the person that made the novel assumes that we know all the Greek gods and we know like the actual event itself and whatnot. So we could make a list then, a song list that tells us possibly the story arc of the novel. So we could give us the timeline, meaning give me the major beats in the novel in a timeline. And then we could also give basically a musical rendition of the major characters. Because again, sometimes, especially when we're using names that we're not used to, other languages, like if the names are Greek names, or if I did the Old Testament, you've got Hebrew names. It's not my native tongue. It's pretty difficult for me to kind of understand. Like, I used to just skip the names, but there's so many characters that you have to kind of be able to distinguish all the names. So you might do a list of basically the names of the characters. Could be a useful tool as kind of like the starting point of learning something like a novel, particularly in the context of a history event. And then you can get into the detail and use each point in the timeline to make a song adding context related to the story. So once I've made a timeline with the major points of events, possibly chapter by chapter if you're looking at a novel like the Iliad, then I can take each of those points on the timeline and ask the system to create a song about it. And now what I'm asking the system to do is give me something that's gonna tell me how I'm supposed to feel about this particular event. So like Achilles is, if you know Achilles, the Agamemnon took the girl from Achilles or whatever is one of the story points. Now, there's been a bunch of writing about that is in the AI mind because people have been analyzing this story forever, and it's all on the internet. So what are we supposed to take from this event? Well, then that's what the song will take that event, and if I expand on that story point, the AI of the song then should be able to give me what the critics out there think that you're supposed to get from this event. The rage of Achilles and Achilles versus Agamemnon, and who's in the right because Agamemnon is the leader and he feels like he's been shamed or something, but Achilles is mad or whatever, and who's justified or whatnot, or what's the culture like and all that kind of stuff. Then you're going to get that feeling possibly from a song based on any particular point in the timeline. So when we start to generate the songs, then we could think about use the actual text to give me the list, make a song that's just going to put a musical beat around the list, the major characters in the timeline. And then I'm going to do something different when I take the timeline and have each individual event and tell the AI to give me a song that gives me the basic feeling what that I'm supposed to get from that event. So that's going to be a general idea with a novel. Now, you can also listen to the book in a music format in total, which I've been experimenting now. So again, any open source text, which is kind of like free, meaning it's been out for so long that you don't have to pay for the text, right? You would think that you can copy and paste that into a musical format. So instead of me asking AI, give me the major plot points, or give me a song about a particular plot point, I can actually copy the text itself and try to copy basically 2 to 4 minute chunks of the text, because the 4 minutes is the longest song, and I can put the text to a song, which again might make it a little bit more interesting if you're listening to old texts. And you're like, oh, I'm going to make it into a bunch of 4 minute songs by actually taking the text itself and putting it to music. Or it might be interesting to do something like that with the Bible, which has some kind of rhythm to it. Or again, it's kind of interesting with texts that were poetically made, something that's supposed to come from an oral tradition like the Iliad. Would be kind of interesting to put it to music, even though the music is kind of random in terms of how it's going to, put it to music. And again, something like Dante's Inferno, I think was a poet. Paradise Lost, I think has a meter to it, a rhythm. So you would think if you just put the actual text itself, that would be kind of interesting to put something that has a meter to music, right? Shakespeare has a meter to it, or a lot of it does. It'd be interesting to just put the text itself to music. So I've been experimenting with that. So I think the best way to kind of, maybe you can use this to engage a text is, once again, get the history behind the text, make a thing about the characters of the text, just a flashcard kind of format, a timeline of the text, and then possibly take particular major events of the text, giving songs about those major events, and then possibly just listen to the entire text as a song, which is kind of interesting. All right, and then you can actually create music to play along with. So any of these things that we're doing, like if you put the text into the system's going to make a song from it, and then of course you can play along with it. So if you wanted to make your own, we're getting like Easter's around Easter, so we could like put like the gospel in the actual text, or make a song about it, and then play along with it. Now it's a little bit wonky because that's not really what it's designed to do. So normally we don't give it the key that we want. I haven't been doing that, but you can try. You can say, okay, I want you to play this song in the key of A minor or something, and then try to play along with it. Or you can tell it to just make a song, download it as an MP3. And if you don't know how to figure out what key it is, you can use other softwares, which we'll look at a little bit as well, to tell you what key it's in. So then you can look up what key it's in and possibly more detail about it from there. And then you can make your own songs that possibly follow along a text or do whatever you want to do as a learning tool from a musical perspective. And then you can play along, with your own songs that have lyrics that might be more interesting to you, or you might be able to learn the music as you play as well. Now, I also want to point out that all of these things that we're learning here as well, the system is quite good also at using another language, or at least particularly Spanish in my case. So I've been saying, give me the song in English and Spanish, and it will actually repeat each song in English and in Spanish using any of the techniques that we've been looking at here, which is kind of interesting. So we can kind of cram in a whole lot of ways to learn different things at the same time, right? Because I can learn a textbook, and as I'm learning the textbook, I can tell it to repeat each line in English and Spanish, so that I'm learning the textbook and I'm practicing my Spanish, and I'm getting some rhythm, so I can do that while I'm running or something like that, because I'm learning, because it has a rhythm to it, so it might be a little bit more fun to learn. And if I wanted to learn it while playing the guitar, I can actually play along with it musically, with the guitar, so I can learn the guitar, the book, a little bit of Spanish, and have some rhythm, at the same time. So there's a lot of interesting potential with it. So it's another thing that we will be practicing with as we use these techniques in future presentations.